Imagine hearing no from the US visa system, not once, not twice, but 8 separate times. Most people would stop. Eric Yuan did not, and today, he is widely known as the founder and CEO of Zoom, a company that became a global verb for video calls. This is not a fairy tale about getting lucky. It is a real-world lesson about how immigration decisions, timing, and strategy can shape a life, and how rejection can mean many different things. By the end of this video, you will understand 3 concrete takeaways. First, what a visa rejection actually means in plain English, and why it is not always final. Second, which groups are most likely to face repeat problems, and which groups often have clearer paths. And third, a practical do this, avoid this checklist you can use if you have been denied and you want to reapply without repeating the same mistakes. Here is the part most people miss. The word rejected gets used online as if it is one single event with one single meaning. In reality, there are different types of denials and refusals, different agencies, and different standards depending on whether you are dealing with a tourist visa, a student visa, a work visa, or a green card process. So before we even talk about Eric Yuan, we have to get the vocabulary right, because vocabulary is where people get confused, and confusion is where people lose time and money. In everyday conversation, people say visa denied for everything. But at a US consulate, you may hear the word refused. Some refusals are final, and some are temporary and can be overcome with more documents or time. For example, there is a common situation called administrative processing, where a case is paused while the government does extra checks or waits for missing evidence. People sometimes call that a denial, even though it is not necessarily a final no. There are also true denials, where the officer concludes you did not meet the requirements at that time. And then there are separate decisions made inside the US by USCIS on petitions like H-1B or O-1, which are different from a consulate interview. So when you hear rejected 8 times, the first question should be, rejected by whom, for what type of visa, and for what reason? That question changes everything. Now, let us talk about Eric Yuan's journey in a way that is inspiring, but also useful. According to widely reported versions of his story, he was living in China and had a long-distance relationship. He took long train rides, sometimes described as around 10 hours, to see his girlfriend. That travel time became the seed of an idea. What if you could see and talk to someone face-to-face without traveling? Not email, not audio only, real video calling. This is important because it shows something many successful immigrants have in common: a practical problem, a clear solution, and the willingness to iterate. And that word iterate matters, because the immigration process is often iterative too. You try, you get feedback, you adjust, you try again. Here is a micro hook to keep in mind. Rejection is not always a verdict on your talent. It is often a verdict on whether your paperwork and your story fit a specific legal box at a specific moment in time. Eric reportedly tried multiple times to get a US visa and was refused repeatedly. Eventually, he succeeded and came to the US, studied, worked, and later became part of the early team behind WebEx, a video conferencing company that was eventually acquired by Cisco. Later, he left Cisco and founded Zoom, focusing on ease of use and reliable quality. Then the pandemic hit, and Zoom became essential for schools, families, and workplaces around the world. That is the high-level arc. But the value for you is not the headline. The value is understanding the mechanics that often sit behind repeated visa refusals, and how a person can move from a fragile status situation to a stable one. So what typically causes repeat visa denials or refusals for people trying to come to the United States? I am going to list common categories without pretending that we know the exact reasons in Eric's case, because unless you have the case notes, you do not know. But these categories are real, and you should know them. Category 1. The officer is not convinced you qualify for that specific visa class. For example, many people apply for a visitor visa while they actually intend to live in the US long-term. Even if you are a good person with good intentions, that mismatch can lead to a refusal. Category 2. Weak documentation or inconsistent answers. Small contradictions can sink trust. Category 3. Security, background, or technology-related screening that triggers extra review, especially in sensitive fields. Category 4. Prior immigration history issues, like overstays or unauthorized work, which can have serious consequences depending on the facts. Category 5. Timing. Sometimes you are qualified eventually, but not yet. Here is the part most people miss. If your plan is actually to study or work, forcing a short-term visa pathway can create a pattern of refusals that follows you. Sometimes the right move is not to keep applying the same way. It is to build a different, stronger path. Now let us talk about the student-to-worker pathway mentioned in your brief. F1 visa to H1B. Many international students start on F1 status, study, and then use optional practical training, often called OPT, to work after graduation. Some then pursue H1B, which is a work visa for specialty occupations. Without getting into legal advice, the big idea is this. Your status needs continuity, and your employer paperwork needs to be correct. This is where people get stuck. They miss deadlines. They misunderstand what employment is allowed. They assume their company can handle everything, then find out the company did not file on time or did not document the job properly. Bridge hook. This is where people get denied even when they did everything right academically. It is not the grades, it is the compliance. Let us do a quick myth versus reality moment. Myth: if you get denied once, you are banned forever. Reality: many denials are not permanent bars. Some are simply you did not qualify at that time, with that evidence, for that category. But there is an important caution. Some situations can create real long-term problems, especially if there is fraud, misrepresentation, or certain overstay patterns. That is why you do not want to panic apply repeatedly with inconsistent facts. Another myth: if you have a great idea, immigration will automatically work out. Reality: the U.S. system does not award visas because you are smart. It awards visas because you meet a definition in law and you can prove it with evidence. Talent helps, but documentation and timing decide outcomes. This connects to that quote in your brief from attorney Chris M. Ingram about rejection testing conviction and the combination of talent and legal stability driving innovation. You can treat that as a theme. Innovation grows when your legal footing is stable enough to build. Whether or not you agree with every word, the practical takeaway is correct. If you want to build a career or company here, you need a plan that keeps you in status and reduces unnecessary risk. Now, how does Eric's career piece fit in? Working at a major company like WebEx and then Cisco is relevant for a few reasons. First, large employers often have experience with immigration compliance and petitions. Second, your work history creates a track record that can support future filings. Third, success at recognizable companies can help establish credibility when you later try to qualify for categories that require showing specialized skill or extraordinary ability. Bridge hook: a small detail changes everything here. The same resume can be weak or strong, depending on how it is documented and framed for a specific visa standard. If you are watching this as a STEM professional or a founder, you probably care about the line in your brief that says your STEM expertise, persistence, or vision can be your green card, and it mentions EB-1A, O1, and EB-2 NIW. Let us explain those carefully, without overpromising. O1 is a non-immigrant work visa category, often used by people who can show extraordinary ability or achievement in certain fields. EB-1A is an immigrant category for extraordinary ability, often discussed in the context of a green card without a specific employer sponsor, but the evidentiary burden is high. EB-2 NIW is a national interest waiver pathway in the EB-2 category, where, in broad terms, a person may request a waiver of the labor certification requirement if their work is in the national interest and they meet the standards. These are real categories people pursue, but they are not magic doors. They are evidence-driven. And the evidence is not just you saying you are great. It is awards, publications, critical roles, original contributions, high salary compared to peers, strong recommendation letters, media coverage, and proof of impact, among other types of documentation, depending on the category. Myth versus reality moment number 2. Myth: you need to be famous to qualify for O1 or EB1A. Reality: fame can help, but it is not the only way. Many successful applicants are not household names. They are highly accomplished within their field with well-documented impact. But also, not everyone qualifies, and you should be careful with anyone who promises approval. Now let us move into real-world consequences, because this is where the story becomes actionable. What happens when you get denied repeatedly? One consequence is time. Time affects age-outs for dependents, graduation timelines, job offers, and relationships. Another consequence is a paper trail. Every application creates a record, and inconsistencies across applications can create credibility problems later. A third consequence is emotional and financial strain. People make rushed decisions, like quitting jobs, selling property, or traveling at risky times, because they assume the next attempt will work. Bridge hook. Two groups are at highest risk of making an irreversible mistake after a denial. Group 1. Students and new grads with tight status deadlines. Group 2. Families planning travel who do not realize how long consular processing or administrative processing can take. Here are 2 example scenarios to make it concrete. Example scenario 1. A student on F1 finishes school, starts OPT, and gets an offer from a small startup. The startup wants to file H-1B, but does not understand the paperwork requirements. The filing is late or inconsistent. The student panics and applies for a visitor visa to re-enter after a trip, thinking it is simpler. At the interview, the officer sees a clear intent to work and live long-term, and the visitor visa is refused. Now the student has lost time and created a confusing record. The lesson is not never travel. The lesson is have a coherent plan and do not use the wrong visa category as a shortcut. Example scenario 2. A founder is building a product, has some media mentions, and a few letters from mentors. They apply for an O1 too early without enough evidence. USCIS issues a request for evidence or denies. The founder immediately refiles with mostly the same packet, hoping for a different result. The second filing fails again. The founder concludes the system is rigged, but the real issue might be that the evidence needed 6 to 12 more months of growth, publications, patents, revenue, or industry recognition. Again, not legal advice, just a realistic pattern. Now, what should you do now if you have had a denial or refusal and you want to move forward calmly? Here is a practical checklist in a do this, avoid this format. Do this. Get clarity on what happened. If it was a consular interview, write down the exact visa category, what questions were asked, and what documents were requested or mentioned. If you received a written notice, keep it. If it was a USCIS petition decision, read the decision carefully and note which elements were not proven. Do this. Be consistent. Your future applications should align with your past facts. If something was wrong before, correct it with documentation, not with a new story. Do this. Strengthen the weakest link. If the refusal was about ties and intent for a visitor visa, do not just reapply with the same file. Consider whether your real goal is study or work, and whether you should pursue a category that matches that goal. If the denial was about evidence for a talent-based category, build measurable proof, publications, projects, awards, leadership roles, and independent recognition. Do this. Plan around timing. Processing can be slow, and policies and demand can shift. Keep backup options if your status depends on a single date. Do this. Use official sources to verify. Monitor USCIS announcements, Department of State updates, and official case status portals. Avoid this. Panic refiling immediately with the same evidence. That often creates a second denial and wastes money. Avoid this. Relying on social media rumors that claim a new ban or a secret policy without an official source. Avoid this. Making irreversible moves like quitting a job or traveling internationally while a sensitive application is pending unless you have confirmed the consequences for your specific situation. Avoid this, using fake documents or exaggerations. Misrepresentation can carry severe long-term consequences. Bridge hook. If you only remember one sentence from this video, remember this. A denial is feedback, but misrepresentation can become a wall. Now, let us talk about what could happen next more broadly for viewers watching immigration news. Even when there is no single big announcement, practical conditions change. Demand surges can slow processing. More scrutiny in certain categories can increase requests for evidence. Consulates can have appointment backlogs. And in employment-based immigration, availability can shift over time. You do not have to obsess over headlines, but you should monitor the sources that actually move your case. USCIS for petitions and policy guidance, the Department of State for consular processing information, and credible updates from official channels. Here is a final myth versus reality before we close. Myth: the pandemic proved Zoom got special treatment. Reality: business success does not automatically change immigration outcomes. It can help build evidence and credibility, but the immigration system still applies definitions and evidentiary standards. Success after you arrive is part of your story, not a guarantee of future approvals. So, what is the big lesson from Eric Yuan's reported 8 rejections? It is not that everyone should keep applying 8 times. The lesson is that persistence matters only when it is paired with a better plan. Persistence without a strategy can become repeated failure. Strategy without persistence can become quitting too early. When those two come together, rejection becomes a step, not an ending. Let me recap in 5 quick points. 1. Visa rejection is not one simple thing. Denial, refusal, and administrative processing are different. 2. Repeat denials often come from a mismatch between your true intent and the visa category, weak documentation, or timing. 3. Status stability matters, especially on paths like F1 to H1B, where deadlines and compliance rules are unforgiving. 4. For STEM professionals and founders, options like O1, EB1A, and EB2 NIW exist, but they are evidence-driven and should be approached carefully. 5. After a denial, slow down, get clarity on the reason, strengthen the weak link, and avoid panic reapplications or inconsistent stories. If you want more videos like this that explain U.S. immigration rules in plain English, subscribe and turn on notifications, because policy and processing conditions can change quickly. And most importantly, do not panic. A denial is a moment in time. With the right facts, the right category, and the right preparation, many people do move forward,